All right, time to do a follow up on that last video. Speaking of the last video, I watched it, and honestly, they say you're your own worst critic, but it's really tough to watch me. I'm sorry about that. So came a little bit more prepared today. Got some stuff so you don't have to watch me fumble around on my computer as much. Plan to spend a little more time editing. So expect a few jump cuts. I know those can be kind of annoying, but hopefully it's better than what we were dealing with. Plus, you get a glimpse to see what it's like inside my mind. Speaking of that, I kind of feel like I need to address that too. A lot of times it feels like I am fumbling around in my kind of trying to collect my thoughts. That's because I am. I have pretty severe ADD, so there's like 12 people up there talking at once, so it's kind of hard to get them on the same page. But one advantage to that is, at least one of them is always thinking about this crap, so it kind of helps me figure it out. And it's real scary when I get like in the shower or something and I end up with like a full roundtable discussion, really figuring this stuff out. So we're just going to look at this as an advantage. Okay, so I want to start out by kind of doing a amendment to the last video. I made a comment kind of saying that that I think only the disc is only affected by changing the fade value. So when you aim down, the fade value changes, nothing else. Kind of like the turn and fade multipliers on your disc. That's wrong. I screwed that up. Same with the wind. It's the turn, man. The turn gets changed, not the fade. And I realized this by doing this. So if I fire off turn rive here on 10 on the beast, kind of see how it flies. Finishes pretty straight because it does have that fade taken off of it. Okay, now I'm going to lower my aim, which is a roll rive. All right, pay attention to the flight. It gets a similar amount of turn, but then, it really bites hard. So it's really noticeable when you look up at the flights. So you can see they took off on a similar line, but that orange one just starts fighting out immediately. It still maintains all of its fade. So definitely not the fade like I thought. But it doesn't really change anything, especially when it comes to the touchiness of a disc, which is ultimately what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, I want to kind of talk about one little bonus thing here that I discovered while I was really messing around with this whole video. I've always known that as you get further out, as you set your angle, that it seems to affect it more. But I've never paid that close of attention to it. So of course, now that I'm paying closer attention to everything, I guess I decided to take some screenshots of these and kind of really look at it. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but down here in the bottom left-hand corner where it's just got one little disc of hyzer, the disc it's at about a 12-degree angle. So I've moved the disc 12 degrees over to the left. And let's not call it the disc, that's confusing. I moved the circle picture of the disc 12 degrees to the left, and it has given me 3.1 degrees of anhyzer on that disc. Okay, so the next one over, I have pulled, it looks like, what is that, 10, 20, 25 degrees over, and it's giving me 11 degrees of anhyzer. And then I go from 24 to 30-ish, and it's now picked up to 24 degrees of hyzer. So yeah, you can see where this is going. I'm pulling over here at 34 and it's like 32. So it goes from like 3-4 degrees of hyzer per every degree that you pull the icon over, all the way up to almost 1-to-1. So what that means pretty much is that if you want to have consistent control of your angles while you're playing, try to stay in this green zone. All right. It progressively affects it the further out you get. If you're pulling your disc down on these outer edges of the rings, I would highly recommend having like a set point that you're pulling to try to keep it consistent. Like if you're lining up that little outer yellow highlighted path that kind of hits the outside of your thing, lining it up exactly with where the outsides of the Wi-Fi bands are. just know that, man, every pixel is a pretty big difference. And then the other thing you have to keep in mind is as that disc wobbles, um, it's going to affect the angle more. So I don't know if you've noticed, but as you pull back, you'll notice that if we're looking down at my sunglasses there, they're shaking, right? Up here, no shake. Okay, well, there's no shake, you'll notice my disc isn't moving at all either. Okay, as this starts to vibrate, so does the disc. Okay, it starts to shake, this starts to shake. It starts to violently, I don't know, convulse, so does the disc. Okay, so this wobble effect, all right, as this disc moves around, so does, again, it's confusing again. As the circle picture of my frisbee moves around, the disc on the screen moves it around the exact amount. And actually, while I was taking those screenshots, I noticed I was going frame by frame, and every little movement in that disc correlates exactly to what your actual disc is doing. So as it's wobbling around here in the green zone, it's having a very minimal effect on the actual angle. You can't see it because it's hidden by your disc. All right, do a little half here. These violent wobbles are, it's barely a tremor. You get out here, it starts to shake a little more. Here, it's shaking a lot. Okay, you can see how much that angle is changing. So that makes it hard to hit consistent angles out here, one, because the disc is really moving a lot when you're doing it. But then also, I could pull exactly, even if I have that set point that I'm pulling to right here, I'm not going to get the same release twice in a row unless I'm lucky. So even if you play the sway perfectly, it can really kick your disc offline there. So, yeah, I noticed that big time while shooting this video. So just thought that was interesting. All right, let's get on to the meat of this video here. This is DGB charts here. I'll put a link in the description, but it's Berkman from the Discord. Has tons of charts up here. This is the new touchiness chart now. Last video I was trying to come up with a value, one value to describe how touchy a disc was, and yeah, I realized that's. I even said, well, the Destiny is super touchy because as you aim it down, it flies off to the side. But the difference in the turn and the fade has to do with how touchy it is. But then there are some outliers like the Paradigm, right? It's really touchy. It's hard to get it to go where you want sometimes. Yeah, so they're hard to throw. They're touchy for two different reasons, and I don't need a formula to demonstrate either of them or really to correlate them. So this is a chart that we threw up here, and I reached out to some people for opinions on this, to see if it made sense, because it did to me, but then it's confusing sometimes. I had this was touchiness, just this one axis was touchiness, and then this one was like angle sensitivity. I was talking with Reese, and he's like, honestly, the angle sensitivity is what I consider to be touchy. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's confusing. They're both touchy, but I didn't have a better way to describe it. So we workshopped this. He says, let's just call this sensitivity. And then he said angle efficacy. Okay. So I'm going to give him 100% credit for this term. Because I said it would make me sound like a douchebag if I said that. But, I mean, what is efficacy? Yeah, it's the ability to produce a desired or intended result. So I was going to call it angle sensitivity. But we didn't want it to seem like, sensitive is necessarily a bad thing. So you can look at it as margin of error. So what are these dots and how do we get these values? Well, sensitivity is essentially just the turn value of your disc. And, well, I cut the deal off down here, but the angle efficacy is just the fade. So looking at this chart, it's all the distance drivers only. I drew a line right here because it's, I think, kind of cool to note that there are understable discs on here and overstable discs all up and down this line. Because essentially these are all just the low turn fade, and these are the high turn fade. But I do this line because they all pretty much move in a linear progression. As you get more turn on a disc, you have more fade. So you can have slightly less more fade and end up on this understable side of the line. Or can have slightly more than what would be put you right on this line, which is pretty much like the 0.5 line. And you'll be more overstable. So I feel like this is a good way to kind of compare. Do you want a disc that's a little more sensitive to the wind and how you aim it, or you want a disc that's requires a little more of a precise aim? The margin of error is lower. Typically, these ones where it's the angle you have to hit, it's not going to move as much right to left. So, kind of as you go up this chart, in the sensitivity factor, your disc needs more room to work. But it's also a little more. It's a little more forgiving of where you pull your angle, but requires quite a bit of adjustment to your angle to make up for any outside factors, be it wind or aiming downhill. All right, so let's start with sensitivity. So here we're going with paradigm here, and I just have a default aim, and I just snapped it straight back down. You'll kind of get an idea of how a paradigm flies. Finishes a little further left because I got that big skip. Now we'll aim it down a little bit. I'm going to pull the same way. And just notice how little aiming downward really changes where it takes off. It still fights finishes left of the line. Honestly, not that much further right. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Here we got the Destiny. This is, you know how much I love the Destiny, but default aim, straight pullback, finishing left of the line. Now let's aim, same aim point low, straight pullback. Okay, that's sensitive right there. So in order to get that disc to fly a similar line as it did the first time, we have to pull it way out here. Okay. And then it fights back similarly to what we have there. So that's kind of sensitivity explained. So if you have a disc that has a little higher turn value, so Captain would be a popular choice. Okay, Captain and a Cloudbreaker. Cloudbreaker has a little bit less fade, but have a similar amount of fade. But with the Cloudbreaker, as you aim down or have a tailwind or a headwind, you're not going to have to change your angle as much. So less adjustment to your aim. A little bit more, I would say, control of the line that you want to throw. Okay, so let's look at angle efficacy. We already know what the paradigm flies like. So this was my aimed down shot. Still flying, relatively similar to that's the exact same as the second shot from the previous video. So what happens if you miss your angle by a little bit? Similar aim, miss my angle by about half a disc, and I miss it by about half a fairway. So angle efficacy is margin of error. If you miss your angle, what's your disc going to do about it? In this case, it's going to be way offline. So here's a good example. All right, I put about yay much hyzer, and that disc finishes, a little bit left. Okay, put a little bit less hyzer on it, and it really swings out there. But because it has that high fade value, and it fights, it actually ends up being not that far off the center line. Okay, so then put a little more hyzer on it. Okay, it has all that turn and all that fade, and it still ends up fighting back. Okay, so what it is if you look up here, it's spending time turning and then fading back. So what it's doing is it's traveling out to the right and it's doubling back and going back to the left. So it's spending more time over here and it's traveling in that same lane for longer. So that when you miss, it's going to be too busy trying to get right and get back left to really get as far offline. Granted, you can still throw this thing a mile offline. You just got, a little bigger window to hit. Okay. So this kind of ties back into what I was saying earlier. This is 4 paradigm pulls, all straight back, all default aim. And this is how much your shot can vary. Okay. These are all pulled with the same thing. There's that wobble that I'm talking about. Even with that slight bit of difference, your angle is so sensitive that you can get some very, very different results. So the paradigm is awesome. It has that straight skip like a captain, with all that turn that the captain has. You can get that same straight skip with this really low fade value. This is the trade-off. Okay. I was talking to Reese, and I think I made a comment to the effect of, this is the player's blade of golf, right? You get the good golfer. They want that smaller club head to gain a little more control over the flights. Thing about that club head is if you hit it in the center, yeah, that's all well and good. But when you miss hit it, you literally feel the vibrations coming up your hand. It can hurt. So the destiny would be the polar opposite of that. It's like the giant game improvement iron. You have that higher ball flight, or more turn and fade. A little bit less control over what the disc is doing right to left as far as hitting that narrow gap. But in return, you get a little more consistency as far as where the disc ends up. So, that's the trade-off. And these are at the polar opposite ends of the spectrum. You get something like Arrive in the middle. That's why the Arrive is so popular. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Okay, so back to the spreadsheet. There's my garbage predictability formula. I'm just going to delete that. It's pointless. But this is my ridiculous formula for my new stability that it factors in drag, fade numbers, all of that stuff. Obviously, fade's factored in already, but an additional amount of fade to come up with the stability. And I made the comment that I spent all the time thinking about this and coming up with this ridiculous number just to show where the green line ends whenever you look at the disk info screen. So I had pretty much written this off as a giant waste of time. I mean, it wasn't a waste of time. It kind of got me thinking about this whole touchiness thing, which is really what I was after. How do you quantify, what makes one disk different than another? But actually, this is not completely worthless because I feel like, as I was thinking what a good visual would be, I thought like back to the old like Hot Shots golf video games. There's golf games with like 3-click meters that you're trying to play. So I kind of thought, what would this look like if Disc Golf Valley had some kind of visual to visualize like what I'm talking about this. All right, so this is kind of what I came up with. This red line would be where that formula I made up, where the green line ends at a standard, your standard aiming point, the default aim. So where that green dot ends, that's our red line. So essentially, if I want to move the end of that green line to my center line, this is where I need to pull. All right. In the case of this paradigm, it's going to be slight anhyzer when it's up at this big boy height, like way up high, where it starts you for whatever reason. I don't think anybody really throws up there. At least I don't. These yellow lines would represent the angle efficacy. Right. That means that if I want my shot to be effective, right, it's really just a derivative of the word effective. So for an effective shot, I need to keep it within these yellow lines. That's my margin of error. And this is a paradigm, by the way. And my stamp was being weird. I didn't feel like waiting around. So this would be that default aim. Okay. So if I go back to that lower aim point, okay, I'm going to have to move it over here. Now, these by no means are accurate. This is way too much. Way too much hyzer. This is probably going to hyzer out left of where I would intend it, but you get the idea. I didn't move much, and it has a small window that you have to hit. All right. So that's kind of like your swing plane on these golf games. You got to keep it in here to get our shot to be successful. Okay, so let's look at something like arrive. Okay, it's more stable, so my red line default aim is going to be over here more, right? I need to pull over here to throw that big high flex to get back to the center line. Okay, this is kind of more of a middle ground thing. It's got a little bit more turn and fade, so it's going to be a little bit more forgiving, right? Is it touchy? I feel like arrive can be touchy sometimes, but not as touchy as a paradigm, not even by a long shot, right? Is it sensitive to the angles? Not really. I mean, it's kind of middle. You can really aim it down, right? Which I do most of the time I'm throwing arrive, right? Aim it down, and now I can kind of pull it straight, right? And it's going to add that turn, which again, not reducing the fade, adding the turn. So it's going to kick it out further to the right, but this thing's stable enough, it's going to fight back, and it's very consistent and very controllable. It's why people bag rives, because it's a great mix of everything that you're looking for. It's an all-rounder, and it goes the furthest, so pretty good combo. Destiny. Okay, this is a gross over-exaggeration. You can't pull that far offline and still get it to, but you get the idea. It's got a bigger window. This is where your base stability to get it to go finish on the line at the default aim is going to be here. I need to pull it somewhere here to get a reasonable shot. All right. It's got a bigger window, but when you aim down, you have to adjust it further out. Okay. So that's the sensitivity fact of it, is you have to move this thing further out. That red line moves out here, but it's a little more forgiving as to where you pull out here because it spends all that time turning and coming back. Right. Whereas if you pulled a paradigm on this angle, it's barely going to turn because it has virtually no turn. And even though it doesn't have a ton of fade, it's going to immediately start moving left, and it's going to have all the time in the world to get as far left as it wants to. To wrap it up, what was the point of all of this? I don't know, just to help better understand the flights. Right? You have a disc that you throw, like a captain, for instance, right? You throw the captain, and you don't like the fact that it's difficult for you to, as you adjust your aim, you can't really control it because you have to place so much extra hyzer. Okay, well, go down here and look at something down here, right? DD3, it's a little less sensitive to those angles, right? Say the opposite. Let's say, man, I hate that when I throw my paradigm, I can't get it to hit the line that I want, as I'm trying to throw it, it seems like I always overturn it, or I always do this, and it's just so touchy. Then come up the line and get something that's a little more forgiving. Okay, Hades, Captain, Havoc, Queen, right? These are all kind of not the right speed. Right, Destiny's a little wild, but most people are going to stick right in this realm right here. I mean, I'd say, you'll see Greg's top 100 bag thing. Everybody's playing the same thing discs, it seems like. But I feel like they're adding more all the time, so there's going to be more dots thrown up here. In fact, there's the Enigma right there. We went ahead and added these new discs that are coming out, I'd imagine, next season. Coming up soon. I don't know. I've heard rumors that this drive is going to be kind of like in tandem with the real life launch. I'm not sure. But yeah, well, speaking of this drive, I get a lot of people saying, well, how's that going to fly? Okay, so I think I put it on here. Drive. Okay, so here it is, and somehow I forgot to save this. So get this stupid thing out of there again. So yeah, just got 2.12. Let's go ahead and sort this by drag again. Please. Did that? Okay. So it is the third fastest disc in the game, behind only the Rive and the Zeus, but it has a lot more lift than the Zeus. A little bit more than the Rive. Okay, we're looking at more turn with a similar fade. So what does that mean by stability? Again, these numbers aren't converted like I did the other one, but it's it shook out to be. Let's just sort it. It was down here. Let's drive. Boom. It's like a Luna, guys. It'll fly like a Luna. Rest easy. It's gonna be awesome. Now the closest this gets to is a Cloudbreaker, the 2022. Okay, they are 0.15 off each other in stability, which I know means nothing. But it's in between Cloudbreakers, closer to the 2022. All right, I don't know if you guys threw the 2022 at all. I throw it in a roll, and it's freaking awesome. But it's a decent stability. It's going to be touchier, right? Because more turn, more touch required. It's more sensitive to angle, I should say. Yeah, it's touchier, but if you play it down, you're going to have to throw a little bit more angle on it. But that lift at that drag, that thing is going to be a monster. It's going to go a long way. So I think it's going to be, it's going to carry, honestly, I think it's going to carry 10, 15 feet past to arrive. And just the fact that, a little bit nose down, even with a straight pull, which as we, talked about earlier, gives you the best margin, as far as the wobble goes, it'll be the most accurate for you. You can just put it a little nose down and get such a straight skip out of that thing. I think it's gonna, if it comes out in a big skip, when it comes out in a big skip, I think it's gonna be like 50 freaking feet further than Arrive. So weird stability though, because I don't think it's gonna be straight enough to cover that paradigm if you like that straight skip driver. But I tried to play something less stable, like that 2022 for my main driver, and it wasn't stable enough for me. So it's going to be weird. I feel like it's going to be an awesome light glide, and I don't know if you're going to be able to say no to that kind of distance on the skip, but I don't know. But yeah, so that's what I have for this video. So I guess let me know what you think. Have any questions? Hit me up. Thanks, guys.